I'm WonderRob, and that is the always angry JeffW, and we just jump pointed right into the Vactor-Verse.
All right, I am Vactor, and this is the Vactor-Verse. Today on the show, I've got two very special guests, my co-host on the video game podcast that I'm on, the Sandbox Gamers After Dark. First off, we have returning to the Vactor-Verse, Mr. WonderRob,
Hey
who was on
guys.
the Ant-Man Quantumania review, and perhaps will be on future MCU reviews here in the Vactor-Verse. WonderRob is a Marvel zombie from way back, so he likes to talk all the MCU stuff, as you are about to see. And then this is a first time ever for Jeffrey Whitehouse II, Jeff W. from the Sandbox Gamers. He also likes Marvel movies. Jeff, how you doing today?
I'm good. Now that you just put my whole government name out there, my
Yeah,
address is 1350.
Jeffrey
Uh-oh.
Nathaniel Whitehouse II Jr. So we're gonna have some fun today, boys, because the Sandbox Gamers are in the Vactor-Verse, and we're gonna be talking all about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. No subtitle, just Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. We all got a chance to watch it one time, so we're going to give our thoughts here in the Vactor-Verse. I don't have a specific order for this, so let's go to WonderRob since he loves Marvel movies. He loves Guardians of the Galaxy. Maybe. What'd you think about the first two volumes, Rob? I don't know if I ever asked you about that.
You never have, and frankly, I was starting to get a little upset over it,
And I
but
never will.
but I'm glad you did. I really enjoyed Guardians of the Galaxy and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I think they are some of the best Marvel movies out there. They have definitely have a unique voice, writing style. The cast, the ensemble cast is great. Some of my favorites, that's for sure.
And I know Jeff W. is a James Gunn fan from way, way back. Actually, Jeff, have you seen every single James Gunn film? Can you think of?
uh, I'd have to go through 'em, but probably. I think.
Have you seen
Super.
Tromeo and Juliet?
Well, let's only do the ones he directed, not the James Gunn written ones. Although he
Okay.
is a really good writer, but you've seen Slither, right, Jeff, with Nathan Fillion and Michael Rooker?
No, maybe that's the one I
And
haven't seen.
okay, that was the one that I think the
Slither.
first time he worked with Nathan
Mhm.
Fillion, first time he worked with Michael Rooker, and
Oh,
also
Super
Pam
has
from The
Dwight.
Office.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
Super was good. So Jeff is a huge James Gunn fan. So why don't you tell us what did you think about the first two, real quick, before we get into three? What was your expectation level going into this movie from the first two movies?
I think I guess like if we're just gonna rank a little bit here. I mean, one and
Mhm.
two are ENDGAME level. Like it is
Both
top
of them.
Marvel, yes, both. I like both. I know some people maybe didn't like the second one as much, but I might actually like the second one more, I
Oh
think,
wow.
compared to
Okay.
most people. But I would put those. I mean, I will get into the other in a second, but I would put those
Mhm.
two at top Marvel tier, easily.
Okay. I myself was a huge fan of the first movie. I remember taking my girlfriend at the time, now wife, to the theater 3 times, and I remember each time saying, "This is what Star Wars needs to be," because it was, like, right before Force Awakens came out. So, I was like, "This is what Star Wars should be." The way that James Gunn wrote this to be an action comedy, that's the way that they should do it. Turns out they did not do Star Wars that way when we got Force Awakens and the sequel trilogy. But I was a huge fan of that first movie because it was unexpected. We didn't know because we had Thor, we had Iron Man, Captain America, like all the big names, but people didn't know Star Lord. They didn't know Groot. They didn't know Gamora unless they were Marvel fans before that. So that movie was a huge introduction to all these like wild and crazy characters, the cosmic stuff, opening all of that up in the MCU. So I think that first movie to me is on that Iron Man 1 Endgame level as my favorite. The second one took a little dip, and I actually haven't returned to that one since the first time I watched it in the theater once, and I don't think I ever watched it again. But that second movie, the first battle, like the opening sequence of that movie, was fantastic. Like I love the way that that introduced everything. I can't remember anything after that. Forgot the rest of the movie.
They went to
Oh,
a
man.
planet and they talked about Ego's penis, or Drax
Yeah.
was really curious about it. You know.
Which that
Oh man.
is actually a good transition, Rob, because the the characters that James Gunn created, because all these characters existed in the Marvel comics, but he kind of had his own spin on it, where each one was different than they are in the comics, like almost to the point where you wouldn't recognize them. But that's
this
the
was laughed
versions.
at right when it was announced, right? Guardians in general.
Oh
'Cause
yeah,
when
when it
people
was
were laughing
when
at the
Guardians of the
cartoon, at the
Galaxy.
raccoon, they were very much not with what Gunn eventually did.
Right, because there was like you said, animated versions, but people were not familiar with the characters on a general level. Like my mom didn't know who Groot was. Now it's one of her favorite characters. So that's what the exposure of the MCU does. So I think these characters are the lasting legacy, like Rob just mentioned, Drax and Batista. And I think Jeff, that's what kind of introduced Batista as a hey, he could be an actor. This guy can do something outside of the wrestling ring. And I think we all started liking him after that. Unless did you like him
Mhm.
before? I don't know if you were a big Batista fan or not.
I mean, I thought he was like fine in wrestling, but he had the same stigma that it's funny because now he's done this now twice with John
Yeah.
Cena.
Hmm.
Where I
With a cult
during movies, I
peacemaker.
think they, yeah. I mean, I think he, I never want to see a wrestler in a movie. I think they all suck. Those are like wrestlers. Typically, I would say this, unless I can't think of one right now, except for aside from The Rock, right? All wrestler actors are like $5 Walmart bin DVD actors,
Jeff, have you ever
but
seen
Oh my
No
God.
Holds Barred?
that
Have you ever seen
exactly,
The Nanny? Or what is it
Have you ever
called,
exactly.
seen
Rob?
Walk
Keep
Hard 2?
Yeah.
keep giving me more examples. Um,
Have
all
you
wrestler
ever seen The
actors,
Marine?
except for we'll give Macho Man and his Spider-Man appearance a break. But everybody else is
3
trash.
minutes.
But somehow James Gunn, if you can redeem wrestler actors who weren't great before, you know what I mean? I think it speaks to So yeah, I mean I saw his name and cringed just the same way I saw John Cena and cringed, in the
Yeah.
other stuff.
So
But
that's
they
one of,
proved me
I think,
wrong.
James Gunn's strengths is being able to take those things that you didn't necessarily think you were going to like and turning them into things that you love, like Drax's sense of humor and him taking everything literally. Like I said, that was not from the comics. So that is a James Gunn creation. We have him to thank for that. We also have him to thank for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So let's get into our thoughts. WonderRob, just real as an overall film, what did you
Mhm.
think of Volume 3?
Before I saw this movie, there's an individual that we both know that made a prediction that said, I believe WonderRob is going to be tired of James Gunn's formula
I
when
remember that.
he sees this, the manure. I remember that. That individual couldn't have been any more incorrect. I very much enjoyed Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I think it's a highlight of the MCU post Endgame. Now, the script's been done for a while, so I don't know if that really has much to do with it, but it definitely stands leaps and bounds over certain MCU movies that have been out lately. I've told you this off the mic. I don't think any Phase 4 Marvel movies are inherently bad. I can find something to like about everything I've seen in the MCU since Endgame, but this one really feels like a step above. So I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think I liked it better. I definitely liked it better than Volume 2, and I like Volume 2. I haven't decided if I like it better than the first one yet, but I very much enjoyed Volume 3.
And I remember at one point you had a formula for trilogies. I think
Yeah,
it started with Spider-Man. What was that formula that you had?
the formula that I stood by for the longest time, and I don't think it really holds. Well, no, I take it back. I think for the most part it still works, but almost always the second movie in a trilogy to me is the best, because, especially in superhero movies, because the first movie typically is an origin story. You're setting up, Spider-Man got bit by the spider, or Iron Man figured out how to make a suit, or anything like that. But by the time you get around to the second movie, you don't have to sit through an origin story anymore. You've got a hero who's established, and you can just tell a good story with them. Volume 2, I think, tells a better story than Volume 1 does, but I still like Volume 1 a little bit better because it was something that I hadn't seen before. Hadn't seen a movie done like that in the MCU, or any comic book movie done like that ever at that
Right.
point. Sort of like how the Avengers at the time, you hadn't seen a team up movie, a build up like
Mhm.
that. And
Right.
while there's nothing really wrong with Age of Ultron, I still enjoy the Avengers more overall because of that fact. So that's the theory, and I still think it holds for the most part.
Yeah, I think they're starting to change that up with stuff like the Spider-Man trilogy with Tom Holland, where it was like the whole 3 movies was the origin, and by the end, that was like the fully fleshed out Spider-Man. And I think
Mhm.
with this Guardians trilogy, if you look at it, and this is kind of like the way that I think James Gunn wants us to look at it, as Rocket's story. Even in volume 3 they say, "Oh, it's your story all along." Like that was one of the lines from the movie. If you look at it as Rocket's origin story, these first 3 movies have to be like a complete set. It's not just that first movie because we didn't get any of his origin. So, I feel like they're starting to change up that formula because people were getting so tired of the origin stories, especially with the big guns like Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, where people were like, "Oh, I've seen this origin story. I know that origin story." And we just saw The Batman last year. Was it
Mm-hmm.
last year?
Yeah.
And that one, there's no origin specifically. It's like, "Oh, he's Batman. He's been Batman for a year." And I bet you this Superman Legacy that James Gunn's
Are we
working on.
ever going to find out how Batman became Batman?
I
How are we supposed to know?
I bet you this Superman Legacy is going to do the same thing, where it's like it's not going to show him coming down as a baby and
I hope it
naked.
doesn't, man. Yeah, lifting up cars with his little ding dong, like in the 78 movie.
So, yeah, I think they're starting to change up that formula. But I'm really wanting to get to Jeff W's take. As soon as he got out of the movie, he texted me and Rob, and he said one thing: "We're tired of Beastie Boys." So, Jeff, expand on that
I
text.
forgot about that.
Tell our tell our viewers what you were thinking when you walked out of the theater for Volume 3.
I think so. That scene, I mean, I guess we're just doing full spoilers, right?
Yeah, go
At this point.
go all in, Jeff.
Yeah. So it happens in the hallway scene, right? The infamous hallway scene. There's videos up online on YouTube
Yes.
breaking it down. You can go
Mhm.
watch it. They play that Beastie Boys song, and all I could think of was how out of place I felt in the Super Mario movie. Just what was that, a month ago ish,
Yeah.
month and a half ago
Right.
ish,
Mhm.
April.
and
Yeah.
to me, I think this may be my one fault with the Gun movies. I think, and this actually, I think, out of
All
all
of
of these
them.
songs, all 3 of the movies, that is the worst song choice that he has made. Only
Really?
because, to me, it is so. It was just really generic. I thought, like, like dig a little deeper in there, and I don't know. It just didn't feel I didn't like that song, and I don't like that I just had to hear it in Mario, was
Right.
my sort of reaction initially to
Right.
that song.
Well, I
Is
think
there a
So
different Beastie Boys song you would have rather heard? Like Girls?
mm, I'm trying to think. I don't even know. I don't even know if you should go Beastie Boys. Like that just feels so.
Or
I don't know.
Intergalactic?
which is my
See, that
favorite
would have
Beastie
been.
song.
See, I think that would have been a little better, and maybe like
Maybe
because they just continually like that is, I think, easily. As somebody who follows that space, like anytime the Beasties are mentioned, it's always No Sleep Till Brooklyn. I mean, Jay-Z's doing tributes, he's playing that song. You know what I mean? Like, it's just overplayed to me. I actually would have liked Intergalactic, I think, a lot more. Like if you would have went that route. But yeah, I just didn't like that song choice. I think it's the worst song choice in all three movies. But not the worst song, worst one for me, I guess.
choice. Yeah. I
Uh,
think
yeah.
you really can see the difference between Mario, the way that Mario used it and the way that James Gunn used it. You can
Mhm.
see kind of like here's the like I don't even know how to say it, like the generic way to use it versus here's the creative way to use it.
Yeah.
Because in Mario, it
It's
was
just a
like,
transition. Like it's like
yeah,
literally a transition
and that's
song.
the
Yeah.
whole movie. And that was my
Mhm.
problem with Mario, which if you want to hear my thoughts on Mario, you can listen to our Sandbox Gamers After Dark podcast where we talked all about Mario. But it was that the songs were out of place. It was like, what does this have to do with anything? And it just feels like a needle drop for no reason. And I think that's like the worst way to do it. In this
Mhm.
one, I like that you can read into either the feeling of the song or the lyrics themselves and be like, "Oh, okay, I can see how this applies." And like you said, there's breakdowns online that you can kind of
Yeah.
match up the lyrics to what's going on in the scene as it's happening.
Right.
So I didn't have a problem with it
I,
necessarily
yeah.
as a like taking me out of the movie. You saw it before Rob and I, so you had sent that text, and so I went into the movie saying, "All right, where is it? Where is it?" I was
Mhm.
looking for the song, and when it
Right.
finally came, I was like, "Oh, okay, here it is." But I think for me, I was too caught up in that scene, that fight, which
Mhm.
I think is one of the best action moments in the MCU. They have this long continuous take which they hide by like CGI cuts between it, but you're going in between each character. Everybody has like a role to play. Everybody's got like a move that they're doing, and
And
it
it
I
was
think
very reminiscent of his recent stuff. That scene, right? Like of
mhm,
Peacemaker like
like Suicide.
action. Yeah,
Oh
because
yeah, yeah.
there's a little more violent in that one too than I think it has been in the past in these movies.
Yeah, which I think is like a strength of Gun is the action and the choreography of it, just like the spacing. Because you can do action that's confusing, like you don't know what's going on, all these quick cuts. I think James Gunn does it right, and I think the humor is the strength of James Gunn. So I
Mm.
wanted to get into that, and specifically, Wonder Rob, what did you think about the humor of this movie? Because that was another thing going into it. I was told, and I think this is very interesting because I don't think this is an not a valid take, but I was told, "Hey, it's going to be dark, it's going to be depressing. You're going to feel bad when you come out of this movie." And I actually came out the opposite. I was like, "Yeah, this is fun." I was laughing, especially with Drax. Anytime Drax had a line, I was laughing. So, for you, Rob, did the comedy come through or were you leaving sad and depressed when you left the theater?
Um, I did not leave sad and depressed. And that might be partially to just going in with an understanding that, okay, all these actors are saying that this is the last time they're going to be doing it. Uh, so, I just sort of had that expectation, and all the marketing, all the red carpet stuff. It's like, yeah, we're saying goodbye. We're saying goodbye. It's not like it's coming out of nowhere. They're not going to make another one.
I thought they were all dead when they were like, "This is the last one," especially with Batista. He's like, "I'm not f all this. I'm not doing
No,
this
I didn't. I didn't
anymore."
Mhm.
believe that they would do it. Because I don't think necessarily killing characters has to be one, or using character deaths as a way to one up like previous movies and things like
Right.
that. So I wasn't really going in thinking that people were going to die, but with an understanding that people could. I guess that's the best way to describe it. I've got a theory, and I get well, maybe theory is not the right word, but I've got an expectation also for James Gunn's humor when I go into his movies, because I see it in everything he does. And this is not a complaint, because I think it works, but it'll be serious. It'll be 2 characters or 3 characters, and it'll be serious conversation. Why'd you eat all the Zarg nuts? Serious conversation. Because I like Zarg nuts. Serious conversation. Get your feet off the couch, Drax. Serious conversation. Just things like that. So I think it held up my expectations on that end too.
And I don't know, Jeff,
Jeff gets it. Jeff knows I'm right.
You seeing it first. Had you heard anything about it being depressing or down?
No, and I mean, and really my reaction was to like that news. I think a lot of people were saying that, but I just felt like that it was just going to be sort of a wrap up because Gunn's leaving, and when he got ousted, I mean, Batista was like, I'm not even making a third one without him. Like it just isn't going to happen. And I would assume all of them felt the same. I mean, you can't take him away from it, but I mean, I figured they hadn't really dived into, because he had been saying that for a while, that it was going to be Rocket's story,
because
like
he said that's his favorite character.
And I mean, I went into it kind of expecting it to be like that, although like I went into it, I don't really cry at movies. Maybe this might have been the closest one that Marvel has ever had, just because I mean, just how sad that is. The animal scenes in here are tough. I have a buddy whose wife is very sensitive to that stuff, and I had to text him. I'm like, hey man, like just a heads up, like I didn't
trigger
say this,
warning.
Like, there's raccoon skull in this one, buddy. Like you're gonna like, it's not like all happy.
You're gonna see a rabbit with spider legs, okay?
yeah. But I mean, I don't know if I had any expectations for it, but I mean, I think that had to happen. I think it's what, I mean, Rob put the Avengers movies over. It would be real tough I don't know if I could watch Age of Ultron again. I think I would rather watch all 3 Guardians over all of those. If you had to make me watch all the Avengers, I think I would maybe rather just watch all 3 of these, to be honest. I mean, it's sort of a mood thing too for me, but like, I just feel like the strength of each of these, upholds. And I just feel like Age of Ultron was boring for me. But but I think the third one, this one, man, I don't know where I would rank in the movies, but man, it's just so strong. And I think it's because of the Rocket stuff. I mean, it like to not be like if you were watching this and you didn't feel, some kind of way, I guess, as the kids say, about Rocket's storyline, his origin, and then him at the end, seeing, like rescuing his own little species, his own little raccoons in the cage. I mean, like I said, like it's probably like the closest I've ever been to crying at a Marvel movie, or any movie for a while at that point, because it was just I just thought it was really well done. I mean, and I think Rocket might be my favorite one too, just because man, Drax is up there too. But I don't know. I love the characters a lot, and yeah, I mean, it's good.
That's what's great about the Guardians is I don't think there's a weak link in the characters. Like everybody has something that you love about them, or something that is endearing about both the character and the actor. So you have both of those things coming together where it's like I like both of these things, and they taste 2 great tastes that taste great together. So I think that is one thing that I've really liked about all 3 Guardians movies was you have each individual piece, and then they all come together as a family, and they all like mesh as a unit. And the Guardians of the Galaxy video game, which we talked about on the Sandbox After Dark podcast, that was another great example of why we love all those characters. And that game takes some heavy cues from James Gunn. He doesn't have anything to do with it, and he didn't write that game, but the
Yeah.
influences of the way that he his versions of all the characters can be seen in the game. It felt like I was watching another version of, like, an alternate version of the
Mhm.
Guardians movies. So I think, like I said, the cast and the each one of them being like a broken piece, and then they all come together, and especially by the end of this movie, it's like they're kind of, each one of them is kind of becoming whole again by the end of the movie. Everybody's got like a happy ending at the end of this, which we can talk about. But I think that's very interesting that you said Rocket now is kind of like your favorite, because, like I said, they said specifically in the movie, "Hey, this was your story all along." Whereas
Mhm.
the first two movies, we were kind of seeing it from Star Lord's point of view, from Peter Quill's point of view.
Right.
And if you go back and look at it, oh, okay, maybe it was Rocket's, story
Mhm.
all along, but we were just seeing it from another standpoint.
And I feel like
So I
out of
thought that was
the like in
interesting.
the second one, I think obviously it became it's just interesting to see him like switch that. So like the second one is very it's much I felt like maybe a little heavier because the whole thing is him chasing his dad basically or whatever, right?
Right.
And then to be able to switch it and come back and like right the ship a little bit and do something different, but still
Yeah.
be cohesive,
I,
to me is
I
what
was
makes it
listening.
interesting.
Yeah, I was listening to an interview with James Gunn, and he said the first movie was about the relationship with his mother. Second movie is about the relationship with his father.
Mhm.
Third movie is about the relationship with himself, because the whole movie he's kind of like trying to figure out, okay, my girlfriend died, and there's another version of my girlfriend, but she's not like my girlfriend. So how do I cope with that, or how do I get by myself if I don't have her anymore? So I thought that was kind of interesting, the way that he phrased that. I never really looked at it that way. But all of these guardians being like broken people, and finding value in broken things, and then by the end of it, it's like they're being repaired. And each movie kind of has that arc where it's like, okay, they're broken at the beginning, and then they're fine at the end, and then you go to the next one. Okay, they're broken at the beginning, and then they're fine at the end. So I kind of like that theme throughout all of these, and it's kind of like also a theme of second chances. Like, everybody's getting, if you go down the list, like every character is getting a second chance at something. But I thought
Mhm.
the structure of this movie was a little strange, because it was, okay, Rocky gets taken out at the beginning, and then 90% of the movie is him like flashbacks, and then at the end he comes back. I thought that was kind of a interesting mechanic that James Gunn set up. Rob, what did you think about that structure of the flashbacks? Did you think it worked, or would you have rather have seen it, kind of like a chronological order?
I think it worked for the pacing of the story. At the very first, like the first couple of flashbacks, I thought to myself, like, maybe this would have been better, like the first half or the second half, or having this be like a, not a short, but like a special presentation or something like that. Because even
Right.
though the movie's long, like if I don't know exactly how
I'm gonna
long
say
it
it's
is, but it
two and a
felt,
half.
yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah, it's
felt
2.5
long to
about.
me.
Mhm.
Um, and so I thought, this, if this was its own thing outside of the movie, we all would have got out of the movie theater quicker. And I'm a fan of short movies. That's just
Mhm.
me.
Yes.
But after a while, I didn't really notice it, and I didn't have a problem with it. So I think ultimately it's fine.
Yeah. Jeff, what are your thoughts on this new Gamora? Because she got killed in Infinity War.
Mhm.
James Gunn kind of didn't have a say in that. And then so he has to pick up the pieces and be like, "Oh, okay, I
Yeah.
want her back, but this is not the same Gamora." How do you or what did you think about the way that they wrapped her storyline up in this, where
Yeah.
she doesn't end up with him? Did you like that version, or do you think it would have been better if they had got back together by the end of
Yeah,
it?
I would actually say this is probably one of the like, when I rank if I'm looking at, just stuff that I like about the movie, this is one of the stronger points for me. One of the better aspects of the story. I did think, man, I forget who I saw pointed out, but the dialogue he's having when they're in the elevator and they've kidnapped that like person that's like,
Yeah.
at the front desk or whatever.
Right. Who that
Um,
girl, quick note,
uh-huh.
do you know who that she was also in another James Gunn movie. Did you recognize
No,
her or did
I didn't recognize her.
she
No.
was in Suicide Squad, she was Ratcatcher 2. The girl that could
Oh,
control the rats.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay,
quick side note.
got you. Yeah, and so in that scene, like it feels like he is talking to Marvel and Disney a little bit because he's saying, he's kind of speaking through Quill. He's like, "Oh, so you took my character, you just threw her off," and he like makes the joke. You threw her off of like a special cliff or something, like some magical cliff, and now she's dead. And so it's almost poetic in the way that he's like, kind of almost taking a shot at Disney through that dialogue. I felt like when he's, saying like kind of you took my character
Mm,
and just did whatever you want to do. Now I have to like write around this.
right.
And I thought it was like I think he handled it like the best way you possibly can. Cause I think, I think some of the stuff after I got out of the movie, like on Reddit and stuff, was like, the spoiler, warnings and stuff were
Mhm.
like, oh hey, nobody dies. It's like everybody gets their own like happy ending kind of thing. And in what you said, Vactor too. But I would argue like they don't it's not like overly happy. It's not like, he doesn't
Mhm.
they don't
Mhm.
like they don't retcon like her brain like, doing something weird, like putting like a chip in her or doing some bullshit. Like it feels very authentic, I think. And maybe
Mhm.
that's why I like most about gun stuff is it feels so like authentic to me. Like dialogue feels like real. And they don't, have them get back together. They kind of come to like a comfortable spot, which is again like I think kind of reflective of the Gunn and Disney relationship a little bit. But yeah, I thought that was super strong. Like I don't think you had to have like if you save everybody on that ship and everybody gets out and everybody's good, Quill sees his grandfather and all that stuff. It's like it feels a little overly happy, like nothing, basically like is the movie meaningless at the end. But I think the Gamora like gives it that like transition from like beginning to end of the movie, the change in that relationship.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting because it's almost like the way that I'm looking at it, the way I'm interpreting it is they're saying, okay, there is no destiny because there's like just because she ended up with him in one timeline or in one reality doesn't mean she ends up with him in every reality. It's not like the Prince Charming, the fairy tale thing where it's like, oh yeah, they're meant to be together, so they will always find each other no matter what universe it is. I think
Hmm.
Captain America might have said, something like that, like I'll always find you or whatever. So I thought that was interesting the way that James Gunn took that story of okay, I maybe he would have told a different story if they hadn't killed her in Infinity War, but he's like, "All right, I'm gonna make lemonade out of these lemons, and this is the story that I'm gonna tell." So I thought that was interesting. Rob, where was Star-Lord's mask? Every movie he had a mask and it became his signature to me. Where was it in
Mhm.
this movie?
You know,
Tell
I
me,
had
Rob.
that I had that same thought walking out. I never noticed it while I was watching the movie, but as I was reflecting on the drive home, I thought to myself, I wonder why he didn't have his mask. And after doing some internet sleuthing, boop, 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 I was able to figure out the answer. The mask was destroyed in Volume 2. I don't know if you
Mm.
guys remember that. Vactor, you said you only saw it the one time. But
Yeah, I
the
didn't remember that.
Russos brought it back for Infinity War. And James Gunn said, well, didn't remember how the mask got destroyed? And he just kept
Ah,
his own continuity within number 3. Although, I mean, how many years passed between Infinity War, or excuse me, Volume 2 and Infinity War? I mean, 5 years?
hmm.
I think, or something like that. It's a decent amount of time because Volume 2 takes place immediately after Volume 1. And then Infinity War was, 5 years later. So I don't think it's not fair to assume that he couldn't have got another mask, but that's your answer. The long and short of it is
Yeah,
James
I
Gunn
was
said, "No, I don't want him to have the mask anymore. I don't
Yeah.
care about what you did in Infinity War.
I was expecting them because they got these shiny new suits, which those are actually from the comics, and the Guardians, when they rebooted it, basically like right before the movie came out, they had rebooted it because Guardians goes back to like the 60s, 70s. There's been Guardians of the Galaxy teams, but the modern version, like what we see in the movie, they had those blue uniforms on. So I was expecting, he has a specific type of helmet that he wears, and I was like, oh yeah, they're gonna do it. They're gonna do it.
I thought
Nope.
the same thing,
Never did
that
it.
they were going to go that route. You were going to see a comic book accurate mask, but no
Well,
such
I was
luck.
also, I was also thinking maybe they just did it. Maybe the whole reason James Gunn did it was, okay, I need him to be in trouble at the end. I need him to not be able to breathe in space. So if he had his
Oh, right.
mask, there's
Yeah,
no danger of it. But I also, that brings up another good point. One of the things that I was kind of like, they could have did something a little bit different here. So we haven't talked about Adam Warlock at all yet, but let's get into the Adam Warlock element also from the comics, and also like one of the original Guardians members from the rebooted team.
Mhm.
But him at the end saving Star-Lord, I think it would have been nice if Gamora had saved him, and then that would have been like a flip on the first movie where he saved her. Wait, he saved her in the first movie, so she would be saving him in this movie. So it would have been like a, it's like poetry, it rhymes. It would have been something that matched up and made this trilogy something.
I'm
So
a
I thought that
poet.
would have been nice.
Didn't even know those words
Yeah.
were going to rhyme.
Yeah. But because what was Adam Warlock's purpose in this movie besides there was a little bit of comedy, there's he was
Yeah.
funny. I liked him, but like if you took Adam Warlock out of this movie, can you think what would it have changed? What would have affected Rocket getting injured at the beginning? Okay, anybody
Right.
could have injured Rocket. Like, all right, he stepped on a firecracker and blew
He
his
fell
leg
down the
off,
stairs.
whatever.
A firecracker.
Which also, I was listening to some reviews and they were like, how is it that Rocket has been with them this entire time and he's never been injured? Because in the movie, the whole thing is we can't put a med pack on him because he had this thing that would blow up and kill him. So he's never been that injured before.
Right,
He
right.
went through how many different battles, and he went through Endgame and Infinity War.
You're thinking about it too hard.
Never got hurt. Come
The
on,
same
James
reason
Gunn.
Peter Quill hasn't had to have a defibrillator, or Gamora, or Mantis, or Drax. It's comic books. That's the reason why.
Yeah, so that was kind of interesting, but yeah, I think
also he's this big. I mean, his hitbox is small.
That's true. That's true.
The whole thing about Adam Warlock was like, this is his origin. Like, this is him being introduced. And I almost felt like James Gunn kind of felt, oh man, I introduced him in the last one. I got to pay it off because I'm not coming back. So let me get Adam Warlock in here.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Is what I think happened.
Because he felt like shoveled in there. Like, it felt like he already had the story, and then he was, how do I fit Adam Warlock in here? Okay, well, he can do this. Whereas the rest of the film felt like, okay, this is Rocket's story. This is like the whole, it's all fitting together. And then now we got to put Adam Warlock in there. So that was kind of like one of my few gripes about the film was the way that Adam Warlock was used. And especially if you're going into this thinking, hey, which I was, this is going to be Adam Warlock from the comics. And we've been thinking about this for 6 years because the last movie came out 6 years ago. And it's like, we've been waiting, anticipating for Adam Warlock. And then he's like barely in the movie. He's in it for like 3 scenes. Rob, what'd you call him? The little small man, or he looked like
I said he looks like the world's biggest little person.
Yeah, world's biggest little person. So he got like chiseled for this role. Like they were talking, oh yeah, you put on all this muscle, and then it was like,
then he had his shirt off for one scene.
What was the point?
Are you saying he has the head of a dwarf?
I'm just
Small
saying
hands.
he
Carny
has
folk.
he has very similar
Oh,
features
man.
to a little person.
Wow.
Will Poulter
That's not
did.
to say anything about him personally or his acting or anything.
Yeah, he did.
He just has a very unique look, just like me.
He did a good job of being that. All right, he hatched too early. Like something was wrong with him. He didn't get incubated long enough.
What's that movie he did with Jennifer Aniston? We're the Millers. Is that what it's
Yeah,
called?
We Are the Millers.
He's
yeah.
playing the same character from that movie in this movie, but just gold.
Yeah, that was good. So yeah, Jeff, did you have any thoughts on Adam Warlock as a character?
Yeah, it was funny. I think the only comment I would make is I feel like, yeah, he has this, like, you could have inserted because his role was kind of, what's the main villain's name? I can't remember his
The
name
High
anymore.
Evolutionary.
The High Evolutionary.
Yeah. So I think you kind of have to give him like a little, I don't know, assassin type character. And I feel like you said, he has to kind of make up for that. But also, like, Marvel stuff is so, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I mean, it's just jam packed with, trying to find another word besides shit, where, like, characters like that are going to play like minuscule roles in some of these movies, right? Like you're gonna
Right.
have to kind of like wedge them in. So it didn't really
Mhm.
bother me necessarily. Although, yeah, I think you could have. There was no significance in his name in it, right? Like, it could have been anybody. It could have been a whole new character. Like, you could have, it was totally like swappable with any character. But I think that's like something like that is bound to happen in all these movies because it's just becoming so like jam packed. Like, you have to fit a cameo in every 10 minutes. It feels like,
Well, that's what the Disney Plus shows are for. Like, there's
Yeah.
so much content out there now. We can have, like in She-Hulk, you can have like an episode of 5 D-listers and
Hey,
get
yeah,
away
just
with it.
don't make She-Hulk and then make
Oh
the
my
Adam
God.
Warlock thing, and then you got a good show.
You got the
man.
you got the wrong idea from what I said, Jeff.
Oh,
Because
boy.
we have She-Hulk, we can have all these other little things.
You just
They
reminded me of a
talked
great
about
point.
people like you in She-Hulk. Yeah.
But the High Evolutionary, actually, another thing to point out.
Hold
the
on.
High
I
Evolutionary-
have something to say about Adam Warlock, just real fast. I feel like under the context of the movie, saying, "Hey, he hatched 6 minutes ago, and this guy can't even tie his shoe, but he can." He's the most badass thing you've ever seen in the movie. For the first 15 minutes, you're like, "Holy shit, these guys are." He's really just tearing everybody's butthole wide open over here, and then he can't figure out what to do with the little dog creature that he found.
Yes.
Whatever that thing
Blurp.
was.
Blurp.
Blurp. It's like the little thing in Shang-Chi, but this one has a face.
Yeah.
Which I think it's his cousin.
At the end, we see is part of the new Guardians team. So Blurp is coming back, Rob.
But I don't get upset about, and I think it's super interesting that nobody in this podcast, but people get upset over, okay, this is what Adam Warlock is in the comic, and Warlock, excuse me, and if it's not a 1-to-1 representation of the comic, I am going to be pissed, especially with the whole MCU, because there are very few characters in the MCU that are 1-to-1 representations of who they are in the comics. Like, look at MODOK, for example. Not exactly the same, and that's the most recent. So I feel like going into these movies just with an understanding that, hey, this is another interpretation. This is an adaptation of these characters. That's why it's called a multiverse.
Right.
It doesn't need to be exactly the same, or otherwise just read the comic if you want it to be exactly the same.
Right. I do like having variation, but it's too early to tell if this variation is going to be good because we just didn't get enough of him. So I'm sure we're going to see him in Secret War. I'm sure we're going to see him in whatever the next Guardians movie is because we saw him on the team. So, and he's young enough. I think Will Poulter can play the character for a while. So it'll be interesting to see where they go with that one. But Jeff mentioned the High Evolutionary. I do have to say he was one of the strong points for me as the main villain. The difference, what's crazy, if you think about the difference between how Kang was in Quantumania versus how High Evolutionary is in this movie. It's like night and day, where High Evolutionary is introduced, you don't know anything about him, but they tell you everything you need to know through just his mannerisms, the way he is, and then these short little pieces of he's in the flashbacks as well, and you see his little progression from having a face to not having a face. And he's also menacing the entire time. He's powerful. And then Kang in Quantumania is all like, I think, hype. It's like people like Kang is coming. Kang is gonna be good. Kang is gonna be good. And besides Loki, like Kang was great in Loki, but what we got in Quantumania, it was like, man, I don't know if I like that. Like that version of Kang. I love Jonathan Majors. Like his acting was great, but that character, the way Kang was written in Quantumania versus the way High Evolutionary is written in this, it's like, man, this is what it should be versus that's what you could be. So
Yeah.
I really liked, and again, this is the, like I said, the character and the actor, putting those two together. Chiwetel Ejiofor is his name. He was in
Mhm.
Peacemaker as the head guy, and he did a great job. So once again, I liked him in Peacemaker. I liked him in this, and I liked the High Evolutionary. So I thought that was one of the stronger points of the film overall.
And I think one thing that really lends the High Evolutionary over Kang, outside of the writing and everything you mentioned, I couldn't agree more with every point you just made. But also having a villain whose agenda is, I'm going to take over the world and the whole universe and I'm going to rule everything, versus, hey, I have this point to make. I'm just trying to do this small thing over here. You may or may not agree with it, but
That's the
you have so
motivation.
much, you have so much more flexibility and room for character growth in acting versus a very plain, I'm gonna take over the world. And I think that was a main problem with
Right.
Kang as
There's
well.
no Kang, there's no motivation in
Yeah, there
that
really
movie in
wasn't with Kang.
Quantumania.
I
Right.
mean, as much as I uh, want to defend Kang, uh, I hit that wall and say, well, yeah, I don't really know why he wanted to
Yeah.
do anything he did. And I saw that movie
Hopefully,
twice. So
this version that we're getting in Loki season 2, which we're getting this year, hopefully that version of Kang is going to be something that we like, because like I said, in the first season of Loki, he was one of the standout moments of that show, and he was only in like the last 2 episodes.
he's in it for like 6 minutes.
Yeah. So hopefully we get a better version of Kang as it comes out. But with Jonathan Majors troubles off screen, I don't even know if we're gonna get
Yeah.
him again in the Kang
I don't
Dynasty.
know. Everything I've been reading, these blind items, not to get too much into the scuttlebutt, but certain studios are starting to look at certain options for other certain actors. I'll just leave it at that. Again, that's just rumor.
So Kang will return, but played by somebody else.
But that's fine. I mean, how many actors did you have playing Loki in the Loki series? Like, it's totally fine.
Yeah, they could say it's a variant. That's easy for Kang.
And go back and retcon, add a few different character or actors' faces onto the Council of Kangs. You'll be okay.
Right.
I just think you replace him, like just Iron Man this shit, and just replace the guy and just
With Robert Downey Jr.?
Nah, the what's his name? No. Who was it?
Oh, you're talking about Rhodey. Yeah, you're talking
yeah.
about Terrence Howard and into Don
Yes,
Cheadle. Is what
just
you're talking
change
about.
it up, baby.
Yeah, who
Just
cares?
with a different guy.
Well,
That's
it's
fine.
going to be interesting.
Make it
'cause
Michael B.
we're
Jordan.
that I've heard that scuttlebutt as well, but we're starting to get to the point where these actors are starting to age out of their characters, and like we said with Batista saying he's never coming back, and actually Zoe Saldana I saw said that she's not coming back for if there was another Gamora role, she's like, nah, I'm done with it. Versus it seems like Peter Quill is going to be coming back. We'll talk about that end scene later, but I don't hear anything from Chris Pratt being like, money? Yeah, I'll take that. Like, I don't hear him turning that down for the Star-Lord role. So I think it's going to be interesting once we start to get to these because we never have that in the comics. The comics, they can be the same
Mhm.
age for 50 years and you're not blinking an eye. But in these movies, I think that's always been in the back of my mind when I first started watching these MCU movies. I'm like, man, what happens when they get too old to play the character? They're not going to kill Iron Man, right? They wouldn't kill Iron Man.
Right,
But
right.
I just wonder how Marvel's going to do that with the multiverse and with all these different things. What's the reboot of Iron Man? Because Disney wants another Iron Man. So
Oh, for sure.
Mhm.
what's
Yeah.
going to be the next Iron Man movie? Like, how are they going to do it in live action? Because we've seen it so many times in comics and animation. So what's it going to be in live action? That'll be interesting. I want to see what
Yeah,
happens
Yeah.
along those
and
lines.
with Guardians, I think you need to respect the James Gunn run. In fact, I wish Chris Pratt would have said he's not, like, I would just openly come out and say I'm not going to do these anymore. It's not like he's not making enough money off of all of his other roles, right? Like he's already got his Jurassic Parks in there. I just don't think you need to.
He's going to
It's
be
kind of like a
Garfield soon,
yeah.
Vactor.
I mean, it would
Remember?
be like, oh God, Jesus. It would be like if you had
Hey, yo,
another
can I get some
comic book writer.
lasagna over here?
Oh, I slipped into my Mario voice. Yeah.
Mondays, can you believe it? Oh.
Yeah. Um, but like imagine if like, you have a writer for a comic book and you're like, hey man, you can't write your version. You can do all the other characters, but we're gonna need your Spider-Man to be and talk the same way as, Bendis is or whoever the hell, at the time. Like
Right.
I
Mhm.
just I don't even the I mean we'll get into the end scenes I guess at some point, but like even the tease in there, don't do that. I don't think. Like I don't think you should do that either. I think you should wait, number one, and then you should figure out something else, in my opinion.
Right.
And that's how you
Or
deal
they
with
could have
James
just
Cameron.
added, they put the legendary Star-Lord will return, and then just put a little question mark. Question mark? He'll return?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know.
Did anybody miss Yondu? Because that's what I was like when I saw him. I was like, man, I wish Yondu was in this movie because he was such a great part of the first two Guardians movies. I really missed his presence in this one. Kraglin tried his best, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think his James Gunn's brother just is not Michael Rooker.
Yeah.
You know, I really didn't think about it all that much until the brief cameo
Yeah.
of Yondu in the movie, and
Mhm.
I said, "Oh yeah, man, that would have been good." But it wasn't something really on my mind because I think the writing and the cast held up. Now,
Mhm.
Sean Gunn is no Yondu. I will agree with that point. But I don't think his presence not being in the movie put a damper on this in any way.
Yeah. And
For
I
me
don't think you
personally.
Yeah, and I don't think you want to try to shoehorn that into this movie, right? I think the last thing this movie needed was more scenes
Oh
of
no,
It's a
him.
long
I was
movie, man.
saying like if he never died, like if they had
Oh, okay,
maybe
okay,
he was
yeah.
part of the team instead of Kraglin,
Mm,
because
that would
that's
be
the
yeah.
role feels like he's playing with that, the
Mhm.
whistle and everything. But I just like Michael Rooker. I think he's a great actor, and
Yeah.
what he did with the Yondu character was great. Also, what was not great was Sylvester Stallone. Why was he in this movie for 5 seconds? Why do you get Sylvester
Uh,
Stallone? It kind of felt like his well, no, I think if you total up his King Shark performance versus this one, I wonder which one he actually had more on-screen time.
mhm.
But why was he in this? Why did Sylvester Stallone? Why did they have him in this? I don't understand.
They brought
Well, he was
all that
in
the B team in for this one.
yeah, he was
Right.
in the second one. Oh, he was in that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
think you just have
Yes, the
to
Yeah, he was in it.
Ravagers.
yeah.
Yeah, the Ravagers were in it, but that was in that movie. His shortness was like, oh, he's going to have a bigger role in the
Mm,
next one, right? That was what I
yeah.
was thinking when they introduced him. Of course, it's been, like I said, been 6 years. Maybe there's been rewrites, but I thought there was going to be this Ravagers plot line. I want to say Miley Cyrus even had like a
Yeah.
cameo as one of the
She was the
Ravagers.
floating robot head, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm,
So I thought that was going to be more of a thing, but I also thought the Gamora story was maybe there's deleted scenes or there's stuff on the cutting room floor, but I thought her time with the Ravagers was not really fleshed out because it's like we see her at the beginning. Okay, this is my family, and then at the end, she comes back and they're all celebrating her, and it's like, oh, that's nice. She found her family, but that kind of happens off screen. Like the relationship of her with those Ravagers, we don't see that. So that was kind of lacking to me when I was watching. I was like, oh, I guess that's good for her, but I wasn't there when that happened, so I don't know.
Mhm.
That they're telling me that they're a nice family together, but I didn't see that.
Again, that's the
So
series. That's the next Marvel series that she
yes,
made
yes, yes.
or whatever.
Even
That's
though
where you
she
fit
said
that
she's
in.
not coming back, right?
Yeah.
But
Just
Here's a
change.
little
CG.
thing about Gamora. Hold on. I just want to know. I want your opinion on this because Gamora, and this is just little. This is totally inconsequential, but it does have to do with Gamora. I I feel like they tried to make her look a little more accurate to her comic book counterparts. The gold around her eyes was a lot
Mm,
more prominent in this movie
yes.
Yeah,
than
I
the
Yeah.
previous two. And as a
mhm,
matter of fact, I've never noticed it up until or not today, but when I watched
when you
this movie.
watched it.
Did you guys notice that, or am I just staring at things that I shouldn't be?
Yeah, I felt she looked a little different. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they have started to, because if you go back to that first movie, and I think they might have been a flashback of when he saved her in the first movie. Like
Mhm.
they didn't, the makeup wasn't as pronounced. Like there wasn't. I think her face didn't look as angular to me. Of course, I'd have to rewatch it again, but I think you're right. I think they've just upped her look as it's gone on.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But that maybe we'll see her again, played by another actor, but it won't be Zoe Saldana in the
Hmm.
next one. Um, I think that's pretty much everything that I had. Oh, actually,
The
this was another
ends.
thing that I heard people talking about. Oh
Mhm.
yeah, we talked about the end. But everyone is saying there's too much yelling in this movie. They're saying that this has become a James Gunn thing. It's like, and Peacemaker had a lot of this. Just two characters yelling at the top of their lungs, like,
Oh, and an
ah,
argument. Yeah.
yeah. I didn't. That doesn't bother me. I think, like Rob, to me, it's become like that James Gunn shtick, like his comedy. I
Mhm.
laugh at it every time. I don't think it's over the top, but I've seen a lot of people, along with this being depressing and animal cruelty, the yelling is the other thing I see people coming back to again and again. Did either of you think that the High Evolutionary yelled too much?
No, I feel like he yelled just right. Like it's the Goldilocks
Yeah.
scenario. I
Yeah,
feel
it
like he
didn't
was
bother
just
me.
right. No, it never even crossed my mind how much he was yelling. Like I feel like because of that, because I didn't notice it, I feel like it fit the character. Now, I've only seen it one time. I only just saw it the other day, so if I go back, I might be more aware of it, unlike the first viewing. But the initial impression is no. That's not something that even crossed my mind.
Yeah, that's the same for me. All right, let's get into these post-credit scenes. So the first one is the new team in Rocket, who has now accepted the name Rocket Raccoon, which that was kind of cool. This is the comics version of him, whereas every other movie he's like, I'm not a raccoon. Now he's leading the team. The new team has, I'm going to call him King Groot because he's like
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
that's what yeah.
big, fully
my boy got
formed.
thick with two
The-
C's.
Marvel's official title is His Divine Majesty King Groot, the 23rd Monarch of Planet X, Custodian of the Branch Worlds, Ruler of all the Shades. That is the King Groot. And when you see him, he has kind of like a crown
Yeah,
head on him.
Yeah.
But Groot, Rocket, Cosmo,
Cosmo. Yeah,
Kraglin, the pet Blurp, Adam
Mhm.
Oh.
Warlock,
Mhm.
and
That little girl.
also the little girl who is Phyla Vell, which is a character. She was also in that rebooted Guardians run, like I was saying. She is a major character. She's the daughter of Captain Marvel. She's been Captain Marvel. She's been Quasar. So that character probably is going to play a bigger role. I don't know what they're going to do as far as aging that girl up because she's never that young. In the comics, she's always like a lady. She's always a fully grown adult. So
Mhm.
I don't know what they're going to do with that. But Phyla Vell is also on the team. Did you guys, when you saw that scene, like we said, we thought this was going to be the end. So when you saw that new lineup, What was your thoughts, Jeff? I'll ask you first.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess I sort of almost said it earlier, but I was like, okay, this is cool. I like this as a post credit scene, but don't do this. Like this doesn't, you don't have to make
Don't
this
do this.
movie. Don't do this
Oh,
movie, or maybe you do something smaller. I don't really have any interest in seeing like another rend. I want a different. I think you need to go like you need to change up something more. Like you should put like another like drop like a familiar face in the Guardians and then change up the whole thing a little bit.
that might be
I
interesting.
like all these characters, but I don't think I want to see that movie.
That might be interesting because the Guardians is like the Avengers. They've had like a rotating lineup. At one point in the comics, Venom is in the Guardians. Iron
Right?
Man is also. So
Right?
a
Yeah.
Venom drop, Jeff? Would you like
That
to
would
see
be
Tom
yeah.
Hardy?
Do something fucking
Okay.
weird. You know what I mean? Like don't
Well,
drop an X-Men in there. Yeah, do something goofy. I don't know.
yeah. Once
Like
they
change up
announced
the
the
whole
mutants,
thing.
Rob. Yeah. What did you think about the lineup for the new
Uh,
Guardians?
it was fine. I mostly agree with Jeff. Uh, but the only thing I differ with is okay. Well, maybe we'll give him a shot. Like all the characters in the new Guardians of the Galaxy lineup outside of Rocket and Groot, I've had like 10 minutes of screen time altogether. So you're not familiar with these characters. You're not friends with these characters. You know what I mean? So with the right writer, it could be just fine. But I would prefer that they pluck Star Lord out from Earth and just put him back in his position. Uh,
Yeah.
but I also agree that going totally out of left field, putting Venom in it, put Thor back in there. Why don't we
Yeah.
go back to
Yeah.
the Ass Guardians of the Galaxy and see what that is? But I do like the idea of somebody semi-established or established character, even if it's in the comics. Like, oh, they're putting him in Guardians of the Galaxy. Why is Nightcrawler in this? All right,
Mhm.
let's go. Like, I'd
Yeah.
be open to that too.
All right. So the last post-credit scene was the one that Jeff was enraged by. He was infuriated by after he left
No.
the theater.
Well, I did
So
call it the worst one ever.
tell us why, Jeff. Tell us why.
That was pointless as fuck is why. I don't give a shit about what him and his grandpa are doing if they're not gonna be if they don't if, when they're talking about the neighbor, if you don't go out and see the neighbor and it's not Wolverine cutting her grass, I give two shits about
Hey,
what's
Logan,
going on here.
come meet my grandson.
And I've waited so I've watched this movie. Like you gotta understand where I'm at with this. I went and saw this right after work one day, so I just go right in after work. I have a 2.5 hour movie. I go through these credits. You give me all the way to the credits. I have to stay for the credit because you do this for every movie, and then you get to the end, and it's just these two jerk offs like eating cereal. Like it's fine, but like why the fuck did I watch that? And really the only thing that triggered me was Vactor asked me, and he was like, were they worth it or were they good? He kind of like asked my opinion. I was like, well, the second one's not worth it. I'm like, so if you want to leave, just leave after that, the new team reveal. Because to me, that shit was boring. And then he was like, well, I'm gonna stay for all of them, and I'm like, well, fine then, do that. Like it fucking sucks. It's a waste of time. That was my problem. It was just I don't. If you're not doing anything with it, like I don't know, like Wagner equated it to the shawarma thing. Like I mean, kinda. I get at least that was funny. Like this one, I didn't even find funny. I was what the fuck was the point to me?
Right. Well, the humor is subjective. Like somebody will find it funny and somebody won't.
No,
But
this
as
was
far as
objectively bad.
well, as far as like what was the point of it, I think the the main reason why you do it is for the comedy of, oh, now he's just back on Earth and this is this mundane life that he's living. But also there was that newspaper that his grandpa was reading, and that had some Easter eggs from the Christmas special, the Guardians Christmas special with Kevin
Mhm.
Bacon. So I think it was humor was the main reason. But then that the thing that made it worth it for me was the legendary Star Lord will return. That got my mind like, wait a minute. Because I was thinking the whole time, I was like, oh, this is the end. Like, he's going back to Earth. He's going to retire with his grandpa. He's going to cut the lawn. And then they said he would return. And I was like, when is he going to return? Is he going to be in Secret Wars? Is there going to be another Guardians movie? Is he going to have a solo movie? Because there is a comic series called The Legendary Star-Lord, but that's also just, like The Amazing Spider-Man, the Caped Crusader, like the Dark Knight. So I didn't necessarily think that was specifically hinting at, okay, he's getting his own solo movie, but then the wheels started turning, and I was like, oh, maybe he would get a solo movie, and what would that look like? So that was, to me, the thing that made it worth it was he will return after, and thinking about what was going to happen after that. Rob, what did you think about that final scene? Was it a waste of time? Did you hate yourself when you watched
No,
it?
but I've also Jeff had warned me, quote unquote, that this was going to be at the end. But I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen any other MCU movie, but almost always at the very end, it's some sort of joke, like an ant playing the
Right,
drums.
there's one funny one and one
Captain
setting
America
up.
coming in and saying, "So waste your time, right?"
Right,
And then
right.
cut or whatever he said. I'm paraphrasing.
Right.
I feel like
there's always two.
Yeah, I feel like now I don't know if they were gonna do this, but I feel like if they just took them and flipped them, like you get
Funny one
the
first.
Peter
Yeah.
Quill eating with his grandpa as the
Mhm.
mid, and then you get the new team at the end. Probably would have been better, but then the new team at the end, and then a tag that says the legendary Star-Lord will return probably won't make a whole lot of sense contextually. Because, like, well, what's Star-Lord have to do anything with that? We just saw Rocket and Groot and all them doing this. Shouldn't it be the new Guardians of the Galaxy will return? So I feel like it makes sense with what they did, but I didn't get anally anguished over it or anything like that.
What's really kind of weird is, if you think about it, Marvel has set up 6 movies in the last 3 MCU films that we've seen. In the end credits, they've set up 6 movies. If you think about in Love and Thunder, they set up Hercules and where's he going to appear? In Multiverse of Madness, they set up the Charlize Theron.
Yeah.
Where's she going to appear? In this one, the new Guardians and potentially a Peter Quill movie. In Shang-Chi at the end, it was setting up another movie. Eternals, Star Fox and all of them.
Eternals. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you're right.
Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, the T'Challa, the son of T'Challa. Where are all these going to appear? Because we don't have any actual announcements for any of these. The only one I could think of is like the Charlize Theron one, her talking about incursions. Okay, maybe that's the Secret Wars.
That's going to be Secret Wars, yeah.
Yeah, but everything else,
if there's not a Doctor Strange 3 before then.
Right. Everything else we don't know. And Marvel they announced all the phase 5 and phase 6, and they had these little question marks, and they have spots, but they haven't told us what's going to come out. And now with the writer's strike and now Blade getting pushed back, like, I don't know exactly what is going to go on, but they still haven't introduced mutants. They still haven't introduced the X-Men.
I don't think you're going to see mutants before Secret Wars. I don't think so. Outside of or anything out of Deadpool.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I just thought I saw an article in Variety and said, that's interesting that there's all of these movies seemingly being set up, but where are they gonna, like, are we even ever gonna see that? Because I've seen some stuff about Harry Styles may never come back, like he may never actually appear as Star Fox. So what was the point of that scene? If he doesn't appear, what was the point of that scene? And so that could be the flip side of what Jeff is saying, where every scene has to mean something and set up another thing. What if we never get those things? Then it was pointless for the setup. So it's a catch-22. We won't know until 5-10 years down the line, but it's interesting to think about what's going to come next in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think the next one is the Marvels, and that's in November. I think we're going to come back, all 3 of us, for Across the Spider-Verse next month, which is my #1 most anticipated film of the year. So we're definitely going to have to talk about Across the Spider-Verse.
After Barbie, you mean?
No.
Aw.
Kill all that. Unless Barbie gets added to the MCU. But I
You
think
never know.
Across the Spider-Verse.
Multiverse, baby. Multiverse.
Nah. Across the Spider-Verse and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem are my most anticipated movies for the rest of the year. And we'll see what happens with the rest of this stuff. But like I said, we'll be back in the Vactor-Verse for another episode. Until then, perhaps WonderRob can tell us where, if somebody's thinking, where can I get good video game content? What
Oh my gosh.
would you tell them, Rob?
Well, lucky for you, I have just the podcast for your video game needs. It's called Sandbox Gamers After Dark. Coincidentally, starring myself, the always angry JeffW, and Vactor from the Vactor-Verse, where we're talking video game news. Every week, we're talking the games we're going to play. Our most upcoming episode is going to be talking about Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Our most recent episode, we were talking about Star Wars Jedi Survivor. We're talking the latest and greatest, but I'll leave you with a little teaser. It's called Sandbox Gamers After Dark for a reason, and I'll just leave it at that. But you can find us anywhere and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, I guess it's about that time to let everybody know that WonderRob loves comics. JeffW, even though he's angry, he loves comics, and you should too.